TV.
Government and Civic Affairs Committee. At this point in time, I'd like to introduce our candidates. First up, we have Colin Simmons from the Green Party. Jeff Crowder of the NDP Party. Irma de Vries of the CHP Party. John Nader of the Conservative Party. Perry Mitchell of the Liberal Party. And last but not least, Roger Fear of the PPC Party. The Chamber of Commerce has had a presence in this community since 1860, when we were first incorporated. It is our mission to be the prominent business organization and to be the voice of business by championing economic prosperity and an exceptional quality of life. In keeping with our history and objective to promote good government and sound legislation at all levels of government, the Chamber is proud to host this all-candidates debate for the federal election being held Monday, October 21st. Our goal this evening is to focus candidates on the issues important to the business community, inform voters and our members, and promote transparency and accountability among elected officials. We will be taking written questions this evening from the audience, but we do reserve the right as an organization to review the questions for brevity. Please remember, if we run out of time to ask your question, the candidates will be available for one-on-one discussion after the formal debate has concluded. We would like to welcome Rogers TV and St. Mary's Radio this evening, who will be recording the forum to be broadcast on both Facebook and Rogers Channel 20. Once we know the date and times this program will be aired, they will be posted on the Chamber website and our Facebook page. At this point in time, I'd like to introduce Eddie Matthews, who is the General Manager for the Chamber. He will be our moderator this evening. Eddie is a well-known and trusted voice in our local community. We are confident in his ability to once again moderate the debate in a way that is fair and respectful to all candidates. Ladies and gentlemen, Eddie Matthews.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks so much. Want to take that so I don't break it on you? Because that could happen. Good evening. Nice to see everybody tonight. Donald, good nice to see you as well. I haven't seen you in ages. It's nice to be back in St. Mary's again, and everybody's mic'd up. I got this little contraption. If I don't make it well here tonight, I can either go to Timmy's or McDonald's, I think, and ask you if you want fries with that. This is the first of two debates that the Chamber will be putting on, the Stratford and District Chamber of Commerce. We, of course, want to make sure that you realize that we're not only for Stratford, but for around the region as well, too. Thanks to our sponsors who have made this possible tonight, Pharma Company, St. Mary's, along with Peak Select Realty. If I can ask everybody, as I'm looking around, everybody's got their phones, make sure the volume's turned down a bit. We don't want to interrupt anybody tonight. I appreciate all of our candidates being here tonight. I have great respect for anyone who wants to serve the public and become involved in the process to become an elected representative of the people of this riding. We have a number of questions that have been emailed to the Chamber office. We'll also be soliciting questions throughout the evening. Our runners will be taking your questions as well, and hopefully we'll get to most of them tonight. Once again, as Travis said, if it wasn't read, please speak with the candidates afterwards and let them know your comments. That's so important this evening, okay? One bit of advice, just for time's sake, keep them please brief. In order to be fair, we'll ask the questions to the candidates in alphabetical order, but we want to get to know each of the candidates. First, each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to tell you a little bit about themselves, followed by your questions as well. So, we'll start with Colin, Jeff, Irma, John, Perry, and Roger. Actually, have we got them in the right order there? I think we do. Yes. Colin, please start us this evening. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hello, my name is Colin Simmons, and I'm running for the Green Party. I just wanted to say thank you to the Chamber and St. Mary's for hosting this debate, and thanks to everyone for coming. I'm a doctor. I work at the hospital in Stratford. I'm an anesthesiologist. I've lived in Stratford and worked in Stratford for 10 years now. I was originally born in Victoria. The reason why I got into politics is because of climate change, which probably isn't a surprise seeing as I'm representing the Green Party. Last fall, when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was released, and that's the report that said, we have about a decade to make all the changes we need to try and keep the average temperature change under 1.5 degrees. I read that, and as part of my job, it's my job to assess the patient and the surgery and see what the risks are. I read this report, and I saw the risks. So I'm an anesthesiologist, which means I take care of the sickest patients for complex surgeries, and I was staying up at night worrying about climate change. So I got involved. And here I am. Chances are I've probably taken care of somebody or your family member in this room for an anesthetic. If you can trust me with your life, you can trust me with your vote. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Colin. And maybe I'll pass on. Everybody can hear them okay? Okay, wonderful. Just get close to that microphone, too. Jeff, you've got 2 minutes, please.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Crowder. I've worked in radio and I've served on various community boards as a director, and I'm a person living with cerebral palsy. I know what it is to confront inequality, and I know what it is to succeed. I've been a social activist for most of my life, and I'm running in this election to fight for real and measurable climate action, to protect and expand our healthcare system, and to fight for people in this community who are struggling with the cost of living. Small and medium-sized businesses drive our economy, and small business owners are struggling to get by, like many Canadians. The other parties are full of encouraging rhetoric around election time, but yet they continue to give more and bigger breaks to the people and the corporations who need them the least. The NDP is ready to make the investments that Canada needs now so that we can have a livable future and a prosperous future. While startups in our communities are innovating in clean energy, we should not be locked in to fossil fuel infrastructure for years to come. While young people are struggling to find a place to live, we should not be shrinking federal investment in affordable housing. And while more and more people fall through the cracks of our healthcare system, we shouldn't be taking direction from big pharma and multinational insurance companies. If you want a different and better outcome, make a different choice. Choose the NDP. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And Irma DeVries from the Christian Heritage Party, you have 2 minutes.
For 40 years, I've lived and worked on a farm near Harriston. My husband and I milked cows, grow crops, buy and sell used grain bins, and create electricity from water power. We raised 4 children, and we have 11 grandchildren. Life is great, except for the increasing bureaucracy imposed on businesses. As a woman who loves to read and learn, I started reading legislation, court cases, and learning about contracts. Commerce and government. It's all about contracts. Every 4 years, we contract for the person who will represent us in Parliament. Will they, or will they represent the party? Life is all about contracts. Disrespecting their inalienable right to life, the abortion industry contracts for profit, kills not yet born children, and sells their body parts. The euthanasia lobby industry contracts to murder the mentally ill, the disabled, or the elderly. The climate change industry contracts for their profit, smart meters, and a carbon tax. You pay. I'm offering to contract with you. I will represent life from conception to natural death. I will strengthen the traditional family unit and promote freedom of speech, conscience, religion, and property rights. What is in the contract that these men are offering? Do you have full disclosure? A meeting of the minds? Let's open the contract and see what's in it.
Thanks, Irma. John Nader from the Conservatives. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Eddie, and thank you to the Stratford District Chamber of Commerce for once again hosting tonight's debate. And it's wonderful to see such a good turnout to hear the views of the candidates who are represented here tonight. I do want to say, and first of all, acknowledge that today is also Orange Shirt Day, which is an important and symbolic day to represent part of the journey on reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. I don't tend to wear orange, but I do respect that, and my daughter wore orange this morning to school, and so we had a conversation about the symbolism of the Orange Shirt Day and what it means for Indigenous peoples. My name is John Nader, and I was born and raised on my family's farm just outside of Mitchell. I believe in the importance of public service. Public service to work hard for our communities, for the families who live here, and the small businesses who do so much for our local economy. And public service means helping. It means serving. It means representing the values and the interests of the people who live in our community. And it means showing up and listening. I'm proud that over the last 4 years as your Member of Parliament, I've participated in over 600 stakeholder meetings with local business people, community members, and municipal leaders. I've heard their concerns, and I've brought them back to Ottawa. If you listen to my speeches in the House of Commons, I will frequently reference the issues of people here in Perth-Wellington. And public service means about advocating for the needs of our community, for infrastructure funding, for digital infrastructure, for rural broadband, fighting for our small businesses who represent nearly 70% of our Canadian workforce, and fighting on behalf of our farmers and farm families when they are targeted by unfair tax changes. Public service means working hard every day for the people of our communities. On October 21st, you'll have a question to ask yourself. Who do you trust to serve you in Ottawa? Who do you trust to be accessible and there when you need them the most? I ask for your support on October 21st. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And representing the Liberals, Perry Mitchell. You have 2 minutes.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming out tonight. It's a testament to our democracy in this country that people do come and take an interest and participate within the community as to the persons they want to elect to represent them in Ottawa. I was born in Montreal. Je suis né de Montréal, and I don't apologize to anybody for that. I sing the national anthem in both languages, and I like doing that because I think we are a nation here that's made up of two people of founding peoples and the Indigenous community and all the folks who have come into this country. We are a welcoming community. We're a welcoming nation, and my view is to continue with doing that. Why did I run? Well, I was told not to mention my age, but it's pretty hard to hide that I'm a senior citizen. It's pretty hard to hide that I'm 78. But I think I'm just nicely broke in and are ready to represent you in Ottawa because I've had a lot of life experience. One of the things that I have done in my life is to bring diverse people together and to solve community problems and to make sure that the result is what the community needs. I've worked with poor people, I've worked with middle-class people, and occasionally I've worked with rich people, or the Conservatives, along the way. I'm sorry about that. Anyways, in the end, my work here in this community and in Palmerston and in Stratford has been about bringing people together. I told the party when I started this that I wouldn't do two things. I'm not going to trash anybody. I'm not going to trash political leaders. And I have a road that I'm going to follow that I know the difference between right and wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Perry. And representing the People's Party, Roger Fuhrer.
Thanks very much, Eddie, and thanks to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event tonight, and of course to all of you for coming out and taking your time to listen to us. And hopefully we're going to get your attention tonight and talk about some serious things. I'm a lifelong Perth County resident. Grew up on a dairy farm not far from here, and And after that, I started a tool and die business in Stratford and lived in Stratford for a period of time, and ended up selling that business and retiring to our farm in St. Paul's. So, as I say, I'm a lifelonger, and it's great. It's a wonderful place to live. And I would like to say that it's just amazing to be here in Perth-Wellington. It's probably one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. In 2015, I ran as an independent candidate in this riding, and that was quite an experience. And I want to tell you that I am so excited to stand here tonight and be a part of the People's Party of Canada. Our party is now just about a year in, just a little over a year in, and I think that we've done a fabulous job at bringing some policies to the people. But my main goal here tonight is to talk about those policies and hopefully jar your attention. Hope you really get thinking about what we're offering, because we are certainly offering some different things. And we have a lot of candidates all across Canada. We're a national party now, and I can tell you, a lot of those candidates are just like me, just a regular guy. And I'm standing up here tonight because I want to make a difference. And so let's have a really great debate. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Roger. Don't put that microphone down, Roger, because we're going to start with you. We're going to start with the first debate question. I'm going to read it I'm going to go to the far end of the table. Perry, you'll get a chance to respond. Roger, you're going to get 1 minute, and this is how it's going to work overall. Roger, you're going to get 1 minute. Then Perry will get a minute to respond, and then we'll open it up for debate to everybody else. The first question that we have tonight is about transportation, public transportation. There's reports being released about cutbacks to VIA in this area. We've all heard about that going on. However, other forms of services connecting St. Mary's to Stratford and member municipalities around Perth County, creating an inter-regional transit service connecting to London and Kitchener. How would your government help with transportation in this area, especially via rail service being upgraded? And if you wouldn't mind holding that microphone a little bit closer to yourself, Roger, you get the first opportunity.
Okay, thanks very much, Eddie. All right, so Via Rail is a federal responsibility. And I've been doing some reading up on this subject, and yeah, the service is not very good, and it's very expensive. But one of the problems that occurred was a GO Transit situation in the Greater Toronto-Hamilton area. When that started to really flourish, that sort of put a bottleneck, if you will, into the system, because all of a sudden there was Toronto and south to Windsor, and Toronto and east to Ottawa, and it sort of separated it. So we really need to, the federal government really needs to step up to the plate on this one and fix that situation by hopefully getting these two organizations under one umbrella. Thank you.
Okay, Perry, can you respond?
Well, I need to tell you that the government of Canada and the Liberal Party has heard the complaints and the problems concerning Via Rail, and they have issued a statement that they intend to make it work. Now, the trick is we've got to make them make it work. We can't just accept that one day down the road that we're going to be able to do this. So one of my goals is to make sure that we have Via service restored and the track upgraded so it can take the trains that we have. The other thing that we need to do is to have a system of public transportation in Perth-Wellington. You know, I'll just give you a little story. I was a chaplain at the jail, and we had a young man who had to come every week and visit his parole officer from Mitchell, and he had no way of getting there. In January, hitchhiking doesn't pay off. We've got to have a service that does work for us in Perth-Wellington.
Okay, thank you, Perry. Let's open it up to everybody else. Colin, you look like you had your microphone ready here.
The Green Party believes in Via Rail, so much so that Elizabeth May, our leader, routinely travels by train. In our platform, we proposed a $1.3 billion expansion of Via Rail service, including building new track to use as sidings so that freight and passenger rail do not have to compete. This is a priority, as is regional transit. You should be able to travel within Perth-Wellington region without your car. The proposed pilot project of regional transit is excellent. It'll be even better when it's electric. Electric buses are coming. This is an important thing to do to get people out of their cars and live a healthier lifestyle and stop carbon emissions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. John, you had something you wanted to mention. Jeff, we're going to come to you right after John.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. I think one of the things we need to focus on as well is, the county is doing great work with their intercommunity transit proposal that's being developed. Tomorrow in Wellington County, they're launching RideWell, which is a ride-share program based on an electronic platform using great innovative solutions like the town of Innisfil is using to use Uber. One of the challenges that I've noticed with these great programs, which are being funded locally and by the province, is that they're not eligible for federal funding. The federal funding is based on per-user data. There is no per-user data, meaning that they are completely ineligible for the thing. So that's one thing we have to change. Second thing on the subject of Via Rail, the current government has had 4 years to address some of the issues with the tracks here leading in to and from Stratford. That hasn't happened. I meet with Via Rail at least twice a year to remind them of their proposal and their obligation that they made to us 4 years ago to restore that early morning train through Stratford and St. Mary's. They have failed to do so, but I will keep on fighting because they've made the commitment and they ought to follow through on it.
Thank you, John. Jeff, you had something. You've got 1 minute.
Intercity transit is something that's very close to my heart as a person with a disability. The lack of transit and transportation in the region can lead to social isolation and can rob people of independence and freedom. And part of the NDP's climate plan, a crucial part, is making sure that public transit is available and accessible to everyone, and that it's low, and that our transit fleets across the country are low carbon. In terms of Via Rail, we have a platform commitment to expand rural rail service, and we will be a reliable federal partner to make sure that those trains are restored and that we have a working inter-regional transit system in Perth-Wellington.
Thank you, Jeff. And Irma, you wanted to follow up?
I think Via Rail is great. My son-in-law is a real avid fan and has been across the country on the train. I'm asking you, what's in the contract? How much does it cost? I support infrastructure loans to make a good, viable program work. But I also have to ask the question, are there other opportunities? John mentioned rideshare, and I think in past elections I've mentioned Uber. Let's get together and take care of our neighbor, and let's give rides when we can. There's a great organization for the Cancer Society driving people to appointments. Let's do that for the rest of us, and let's do it together.
Okay, thanks, Irma. There's a second part to that transportation question, and we've all dealt with this and know somebody who's had a difficult time getting to their job. It's employment. Part 2 of that question revolves around employment. Many businesses can't get enough help. One complaint is that there's no public transit system in place for people who reside from outside of St. Mary's but do have the qualifications to work at these businesses. St. Mary's is growing. There's a lot of opportunity here. It's just getting people around, and even from outside if it is skilled labor. Smaller communities need to attract these people and younger people as well. We're going to start with Colin first and then go to Jeff. You've got 1 minute to respond. How will your government help these businesses and families? Colin.
At the Green Party, we believe in regional transit as a way to get people out of their cars. We need to do this so that businesses can grow and employees can make it to work. Another issue, in addition to the transit, is housing. Small markets like this do not have rental housing available for a worker who wants to come and settle in this region. We would also support purpose-built rental housing through tax breaks for those contractors. We need to invest in public transit so that people can get around without using a car. It makes sense for everyone. Businesses don't want to have giant parking lots just so people can make it to work. And we're not organized enough yet to have everyone carpool to work. So regional transit is important between London, Stratford, and St. Mary's. The Green Party supports it, and I think it will help everyone economically in the long run.
Okay. Jeff, from the NDP, your government, you've got 1 minute to tell us how you would help out in this area.
I wanted to, thanks for the question. I was speaking to someone at the Waterloo University campus in Stratford, and the two things that they wanted me to know as a candidate were that their program, which is world leading innovative program, could not grow without sustainable transit funding and funding for affordable housing. Once again, I was a director on a co-op housing board for 5 years, and so the issue of affordable housing is close to my heart. Jagmeet Singh has promised to build 500,000 new non-market co-op and affordable homes within the first mandate, and make it easier for families to take out mortgages with returning the 30-year CMHC mortgage. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Let's open it up for who would like to respond to that now. Back, John.
Yeah, a couple points. First of all, the transit issue is important. If people can't get to the job that they have, if they can't get the job that they have, they're not going to go to work. And what we see across Perth-Wellington is many businesses resorting to busing in employees, not just from outside of the immediate area, but significantly outside of the region from the GTA, which is not a long-term sustainable solution. Because as soon as an employee who's being bussed in from Brampton or Mississauga finds a job more local to them, they're not going to take that 2-hour bus ride on a daily basis. So that is not a long-term sustainable basis. We have the unique challenge of having a low unemployment, which for the most part is usually a good thing. But when it comes to labor issues, it's a challenge, because for not filling the jobs, we run the risk of losing contracts, of losing business locally. The other thing we need to be recognized, too, is that when we have newcomers coming to this area, whether newcomers to the area or newcomers to the country, we have to have the services available for them. And that's done through a local immigration partnership, which the county will be spearheading.
Okay, we'll follow up on that. I know, Roger, you look like the People's Party might dispute that or have their own ideas towards it.
Yeah, some of this has to do with our immigration policy that we're proposing. And right now, we're looking for economic immigrants to be allowed to come into this country. Under the current immigration plan, there are a lot of immigrants flooding over the border, none of whom have been vetted. So we want to sit down and speak with those people personally, find out what skills they can bring to the country, and find out what they offer to this country. And that right there is going to help employers immensely.
Okay, Irma, you have 1 minute.
Hello?
There we
Okay.
go.
Our party, in many ways, agrees with John here, and we certainly think that busing of employees is not sustainable. We'd like to see people being able to live and work in the community in which they are residing. So we don't support foreign ownership of houses. We also would like to strengthen the family, because by strengthening the family, we won't have families living in two separate houses with one parent in one house and another parent in another house, both maintaining a house that's good enough for their family. So we would like to see the family be strengthened so that more housing is available for everyone to live in. We also support granny suites for housing so that more people can live close to where they want to be with their families.
Thanks, Irma. And Perry, how would the Liberal government handle this?
Well, the suggestions made tonight that make sense. There's all sorts of alternatives that we can use. But the important thing is that we have to take care of the planet. If we have all sorts of carbons being dumped into the atmosphere to bring about better transportation without taking care of the planet, we're not achieving anything. What we need to do is to have this go with a plan by which to reduce carbon emissions in the area, and that's really important. It's all very well to get buses and do this and that next thing, but if we're still dumping carbon into the atmosphere, we're losing. We're not gaining.
Okay, thanks, Perry. Number 3, our third question here. We need more affordable housing in St. Mary's. The average price of residential properties in the Huron-Perth Real Estate Association, and ladies behind me might be able to correct me on this, but from the Huron-Perth Real Estate Association, sold in August of this year was a record $412,000, jumping 20% from August 2018. Any solutions that your government would do to assist for the first-time home owners? Perry, we'll start with you and then go over to John Nader for a follow-up.
Well, the Liberal government has been involved in housing over the last 4 years. It launched Canada's first ever national housing strategy, a 10-year plan that will help more than 600,000 Canadians find safe and affordable places to live. It's funded the construction of nearly 140,000 more housing units to be built by 2028. Created a new Canada housing benefit to help 300,000 Canadians with high costs of rent. And it launched the first-time home buyers incentive that will save first-time home buyers hundreds of dollars. The thing that's really important in new housing is to make sure that the housing is mixed. There's no sense in putting up these monster houses or houses only for the people who can really afford it. We have to put up houses where ordinary people and people on less income can afford it. We have to have mixed housing, not just housing for the wealthy.
Thank you, Perry. John, follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. First of all, I think one of the terms I like to use is attainable housing. Housing that's attainable for those on a certain income threshold. And I think whenever we're talking about federal funding for housing, I think the challenge is always that it has to be done with a rural lens. What works in Toronto, what works in Vancouver, doesn't work here in Perth-Wellington. So we need to have a specific rural focus when we're doing that. I have to mention something very briefly about the first-time home buyer gimmick that I've heard about from my Liberal friends. You know, I don't know anyone who thinks it's a good idea that the government should be a co-owner of your home. I don't know anyone who thinks that the government should be in the real estate speculation business. You know, Liberals used to believe at one time that the state had no place in the bedrooms of the nation, and now under their plan, they're going to own the bedrooms of the nation. It just makes no sense.
Thank you, John. Jeff, it looked like you were ready to respond there.
Well, I thought it was interesting that Perry said that it was the first ever national housing strategy. We, of course, remember the National Housing Program that insured lots of CMHC properties, which was killed by the Liberal government in 1995. And in fact, Jack Layton pointed that out and was much pilloried in the media. But in fact, the housing crisis is ongoing because of that decision. As I mentioned, the NDP is going to build 500,000 new co-op and below-market homes, and we're going to make it easier for first-time home buyers by extending the mortgage terms and taking the speculation out of our housing market with a foreign buyer's tax to make sure that Canadians can live where they work and prosper.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Colin?
For first-time home buyers, I feel their pain, but the Liberal promise to increase the amount that the first-time home buyer can spend in hot markets like Victoria, Vancouver, and Toronto doesn't actually fix the problem of foreign speculation in the market. That has falsely elevated the market and put it out of reach for many people. So the Green Party does have also a foreign buyer tax. So if your house is unoccupied and you do not reside in Canada, there will be an extra tax in order to dissuade people from buying property to sell it in 5 years and make a bundle. We also are developing 25,000 co-op housing nonprofit developments per year in our budget, plus renovating other units for availability on the market. The Mr. Nader was giving the Liberals a hard time. Oh,
we'll come back to that. Hold that thought. Irma, I saw you writing frantically there. Tell us what you were writing down.
I think the red tape and the bureaucratic delays and short-sighted zoning restrictions have made construction of new housing much more expensive. When somebody needs to pay $70,000 in development charges in a town like Innisfil, then it's really difficult to build your property that you want to build. I think we have to be very cautious, and I think we need to educate people. When people get approved for a mortgage, great, they buy the place of their dreams. Next thing you know, they need a new car, or they want new furniture to make the house look normal. They don't want their old furniture, and all of a sudden they're in a financial bind. So I think some of this housing affordability is really a problem with managing money, and I think we need to educate people. And one good way of doing that is playing a game called Cash Flow by Robert Kiyosaki. Try it. You'll like it.
And Roger?
Yes, the County of Perth is currently undergoing an official plan review right at this time, and I recently attended one of those meetings and helped them along with a little bit of input, I hope, about tiny homes that are permanent, well-insulated on separate individual lots, and, of course, well-serviced with electricity, etc., that people can own. And tiny homes are starting to catch on worldwide. And you could probably build a really nice tiny home that you could own for $100,000, $150,000. And this would be an ideal way for young couples to come into the community and start owning something that they could own. It's also a place that some retired folks might consider to choose to buy a tiny home to spend some years in such a venue. Anyways, I think that this is definitely worth looking at here locally.
Okay. Anybody else have anything in more about this?
I would just add as well that co-housing is an option that many seniors and increasingly young people, because of the precarious economy, are considering. And the NDP would absolutely introduce legislation to make it possible to to facilitate co-ownership between individuals more easily.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Then we will move on to question number 4 about taxation. We all love talking about this. Canada's tax system has become more complex and many feel inefficient, killing investment and jobs. Canada hasn't undertaken a review of its tax system since the 1960s. And this will be going to John Nader and then over to Irma for a follow-up. John, do you think that our tax system needs to be reviewed, and what changes would you like to see made?
First, easy part, yes. Yes, I do think we do need to review our tax system. Our tax system and the tax code that goes along with it is massive. It's massive, and it gets larger each year. And it goes along with the regulatory burden, especially that small businesses face. Massive challenge for a small business when they should be running their business. They're actually dealing with Canada Revenue Agency more often than not, or they're dealing with other government departments time and time again. What our Conservative Party is proposing is that we will have a significant focus on reducing the red tape and the regulatory burden that goes with the tax system. We will also have a minister mandated of reviewing the regulatory burden. We will mandate each minister to focus on issues that will spur innovation, on promoting prosperity and getting jobs and livelihoods as the focus, rather than dealing with government regulatory burden. And this is something that we need to do not just for local businesses here in Perth-Wellington, but to spur the economy across Canada.
Okay. Thank you, John. Irma, as a follow-up, you have 1 minute. Well, you might as well leave that on, okay, because the battery's good on that.
The Christian Heritage rejects the concept of income tax completely, because it unfairly punishes those who work hard. The harder you work, the more tax you pay. So why work? It's wrong to take money from people who have worked hard for it. We believe in a better solution, and that's called a fair tax. We would replace the income tax completely with a fair tax, a national sales tax based not on what you earn, but on what you spend. That gives you the power to decide when and how you will pay your tax. If you buy lots of luxury items, you will pay more tax. The fair tax would tax purchases, not income, and that would simplify the income tax completely and remove all that complicated paperwork for both individuals and business.
Okay. Thank you, Irma. Jeff, you look like you're ready to say something.
Well, the Liberals and the Conservatives around election time, they make all kinds of promises about reforming the tax system. But only the NDP is talking about making the wealthy and the well-connected pay more. I mean, in my many conversations across the riding, people say, well, it'd be great if you could get that done. Well, let's try. Let's try to go after the billions of dollars that are being held offshore and the billions of dollars that we could tax by taxing obscene wealth. The NDP is going to introduce a 1% tax on the 1% of the 1%. That's everybody with an income of over $20 million. And with that, we could fund pharmacare and other social programs that we badly need.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Perry, what would the Liberals do in this situation about the tax system?
The green light's on, Eddie.
There we go.
There we go.
I'm just the eye candy here. I can't help you with that part of it.
I can tell green from red, and blue. One of the problems is that we live in a very complex world, and the tax system in Canada is a complex one. There's no easy solution to this. You can't just suddenly wave a magic wand like my brother in the NDP and sort of say, the old people that are rich, they'll pay more and everything will be fine. It's a complex issue. The reason we've been able to afford to bring 900,000 children out of poverty in Canada this year is because we worked the tax system, giving more money to those parents who need it to buy food for their children. It is something that's a complex issue. And unless we recognize that, we can diddle with it all we want, but if we just throw out the baby with the bathwater, we'll have nothing.
Okay, we'll come back to that again. Colin, you wanted to respond to this.
I do. The Conservatives and Liberals do not want to change the tax code. They haven't since the 60s, and they're the only parties that have been in power. The Green Party believes that most people currently pay enough tax, and that it's multinational corporations and the wealthiest that need to pay more. We need to close the loopholes that allow people to move money offshore and not pay tax in Canada on it. We need to make multinational corporations like Netflix, Facebook, and Google pay their fair share because we all use their services. In addition, we need to close the capital gains loophole, which 85% of which is used by the top 1%. And we need to close the stock option loophole, which corporations, instead of paying someone a full rate, will give them will give them stock options which are not taxed at the same rate. Beware of the shiny baubles that are being shown to you by the Liberals and Conservatives. They're making the tax code more complex, and people don't cash in on all these tax breaks.
Yeah,
thank you.
And Roger, your last follow-up here.
First and foremost, we're going to abolish the carbon tax. Now, provinces can still soldier on and have their own similar tax if they choose, but we're getting rid of it on the federal level. Second of all, we're going to simplify the tax system, and we're going to start by raising the personal exemption to $15,000, and from $15,000 to $100,000, it's going to be 15%, and $100,000 and over is going to be 25%. So there's only going to be those two brackets. And this is going to make things so much simpler for everybody. It's also going to help those on the lower end of the spectrum to get by, and it's going to cost those on the higher end of the spectrum a few more bucks. And importantly to this community, we are going to reduce the farm tax to 10%. And stay tuned, and I'll tell you how we're going to pay for it.
Okay, well, we'll open it up a bit just as a follow-up, because one of the things that I keep reading about in the media, the rich keep getting richer, and there's a great divide between the rich and the poor. Do you see any of that happening and coming closer together? Colin?
It's no mistake that the finance minister tends to be a rich guy, okay? Our current finance minister forgot he had a chateau in France. How rich do you have to be to forget a piece of property like that? To follow up on another point, a flat tax like a 15% or 25% for over $100,000, that is proportionally a savings for the richest people. It is not something people should be voting for if you want the rich to pay more tax.
Pharma, you look like you wanted to say something.
One of the big problems in our nation is that we're paying $70 million a day in interest payments on our national debt. If we had that money to spend, we could spend it on housing and on via rail and on a whole lot of other health concerns, hospitals, hospices, and all kinds of other places. I think we need to think that, corporations, if you tax them heavier, they're just going to add their cost of tax to the goods and services that they're providing to you. And guess who pays? You do. And as far as people getting money and taking it offshore, that's what all rich people do. They just happen to know how to do it. And it's because our taxes are too high here and disproportionately targeting the rich that they're taking it off. They're getting it away. They don't want to stay here. And I don't blame them.
Okay. John, you want to follow up?
Yeah, one of the first things that the Liberals did when they came to office 4 years ago was introduce a so-called middle-class tax cut. I say so-called because anyone making $44,000 or less got absolutely nothing. But someone making $199,000 a year got the maximum. And through that program, they tried to target the richest so-called 1%. And what happened? They actually brought in $4 billion less from that cohort in the first year after this tax change took place. So what we need to do is focus our tax system on helping those who really need it, those in the lowest income tax bracket. A universal tax cut that we're proposing would focus on those making under $44,000 a year, not those making $199,000 a year.
Okay. Colin, then we'll get to Jeff.
To respond to what Irma said, Mark Carney, the previous governor of the Bank of Canada, stated that the corporations of Canada, when they received a tax break under a previous government, held on to the money. They didn't hire more people. They didn't raise anyone's salaries. They kept that dead money in their coffers and did nothing with it. If corporations are taxed more, it is in their best interest to hire more people because that reduces their overall income. If you have 100 employees, their salaries come off of your gross income as a corporation. We need to move the dead money out of the corporations so that it can be spent as salary on workers.
Okay. Jeff, you want to follow up?
It's about choices. It's not a magic wand. It's just a matter of choosing to not to privilege the millionaires and billionaires. This has been going on for generations under Liberal and Conservative governments. In fact, the Conservatives' tax plan is doing the very same thing that John just criticized the Liberals for. The maximal benefit for taxpayer filers under that so-called universal plan, and I'm surprised to hear the Conservatives support a universal
We're out of
anything.
time on that one, Jeff. We're right out of time on that one. Sorry about that. We're going to come back to that. Our fifth question here, and we'll pose this to Jeff, pass it on to Colin for a response, is about trade. Small and medium-sized businesses need resources to help them succeed. When it comes to trade, just 4% of Canadian small and medium-sized businesses exported goods in 2017. This is a fraction of the 20% of exporting companies in other G7 countries. Any suggestions that the Greens would have to assist with these size companies to be more competitive? I'm sorry, to the NDP first, and then the Greens will follow up.
Well, yes. I mean, Business Development Canada has not fulfilled its mandate in terms of getting small businesses to help to invest abroad. We would reimagine that agency to assist small businesses, make it easier for entrepreneurs to succeed, and make sure that Canada's trade agreements were actually based on the principle of reciprocity instead of corporate investor rights agreements as they have been for the last several decades.
Okay, Colin, as a follow-up.
The federal government needs to do a better job of promoting Canadian business abroad. that seems pretty clear if only 4% of small and medium businesses are basically exporting. Canada does have its strengths. The majority of our trade is with the U.S., and they, of course, have imploded over the last several years and have tried protectionist measures. The Green Party, international trade is difficult because you're playing with other players like China, who unfortunately we also have had a disagreement with recently because of some other political issues. The Green Party wants people to focus locally. Our local economy is where we need to invest. We're proposing $15 billion of increased agricultural markets so that we can actually focus more internally and therefore not have so many expenses to move things abroad.
Okay, we'll hold it at that one. Take it to the end of the table. Roger, how would you guys help out?
Well, we're going to take a really close look at internal trade. Right now, there's a lot of barriers up within this country itself. Interprovincial trade is not possible on some products such as agricultural products and alcohol, and it's due to, in large part, to government monopolies. So, and this is actually against the Constitution of Canada for this to be occurring, because the Fathers of Confederation wanted free trade throughout the entire country. So we're going to fix that. We're going to drop the barriers towards interprovincial trade, and that's going to help out substantially, I believe.
Okay. Perry Mitchell, how would the Liberals handle this?
Well, they've already started doing this. And think back to the time that the pig producers, the pork producers, had the China export blocked by this nonsense that's going on with one of their, I won't say anything more, about a lady who's trying to escape extradition. The Canadian government, the Trade Commission, didn't miss a trick on this, and those pigs were sold to another part of the world, and people got their money. Canola, that the Chinese people really like in China, was sold. We just took another path and sold the canola. You can't have trade in this world just locally. It doesn't work. We live in a multinational, international world in which trade has to go on. And therefore, the Conservatives, they can do however they want, but for the Liberals, we stick with international trade.
Okay. John, how would the Conservatives handle this?
Well, first of all, I think there'd be a lot of pork producers and beef producers and canola producers lost across this country who would be awfully surprised by Thierry's remarks just now. On the international stage, we need to be taking a strong stand when it comes to China. You know, we have 2 Canadian citizens being held on trumped-up charges in China. They're not being provided with the full consular services that we should, and yet Canada, the Liberal government, is giving the China-led Asia Infrastructure Bank $250 million to build infrastructure in Asia. We haven't taken China to the WTO, which we should. And up until about a few weeks ago, we didn't even have an ambassador to China because the former ambassador had to resign in disgrace after publicly telling China that they'd be better off with a Liberal government because they'd be friendlier to China than a Conservative government. When we don't have a prime minister or a government who is respected on the world stage, we are going to have a lot of problems doing trade internationally. A Conservative government will champion our small businesses internationally.
Thank you, John. Irma?
I'll just add a short thing. We would add a trade certificate that shows that the goods and services that are coming into Canada from countries such as China are made in an environmentally friendly way, and most importantly, in a way that is safe for the workers. We don't want to buy goods from China that are made by 10-year-old children, and we want to stop that. We want to have certificates proving that those goods were properly made in a safe environment for the workers.
Okay. We'll throw this out just briefly here. Are we more concerned with the Americans or the Chinese at this particular point when it comes to trade right now? John?
I think it's like anything. We need to diversify our markets. And that was the original goal of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was a bulwark against China and the growing influence that China had in the Asian Pacific market. You know, unfortunately, our friends south of the borders went a far different route when they turn to a new leadership and turning to protectionist measures. But that's the direction we need to continue to take. We need to continue diversifying our markets internationally, so that when one door slams shut, there's another one that we're able to open. The Indian market. India used to be one of those markets where we could turn to. Unfortunately, due to mismanagement over the last few years, that's no longer as lucrative a market for Canada because of the mismanagement of the international file. So when we have challenges with the United States, when we have challenges with China, we need to have a diversity of markets. That's why the former Conservative government took the number of trade deals we had internationally from 5 to over 50 countries internationally. And that's the direction we need to be taking.
Okay. Jeff, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Well, I think it's interesting that the Conservatives are now concerned with taking a harder line on China, because it was the Conservative government that signed the foreign investment treaty with the Chinese without any consultation, with only a token parliamentary debate. And that's the important thing about the NDP and trade. We support international trade, but it should be fair trade. It's based on reciprocity and takes into account human rights, the human rights record of the trading nations, and it's a fully consultative approach. Now, why are our dairy industry and our farmers asking for, has to wait for compensation? They should have been included in the process from the beginning. That's something that the NDP would do. That we would review all our trade agreements through those lenses.
Okay, Irma?
Under the transportation or the TPP, a foreign country has power over our country through the contract that is set up. And that's what we need to be very careful. We have smart meters here in Canada that came from outside of Canada that do not have a safety certificate. The other thing is our closest neighbor, the U.S., can drown us in milk, eggs, and poultry, and other goods. And we need to keep that balance. We need to protect our own. We need to be a sovereign nation, because if we can't feed ourselves, then we are going to be a slave to whoever brings us the food.
Good. Thanks, Colin.
We would do better to negotiate not directly with the federal government of the United States, but to negotiate with the state-level representatives. They tend to be a little more reasonable and don't fly off the handle. One of the main issues that got Canada into trouble with China was the extradition issue with the Huawei executive. China took issue with the double standard that was presented to them, where Justin Trudeau said he would not interfere on a legal proceeding, and then was found to be interfering with the SNC-Lavalin delayed prosecution agreement. It was immediately after that came to light that China started playing dirty and holding Canadian citizens. We can't use double standards. We need to apply the law evenly.
Okay, good, thank you. We've got some questions from the floor here, and we'll start this one off, and this is open to everybody, okay? This is about climate and environment. Our youth have clearly demonstrated to us that they are serious about climate change and the fate of our Earth. If elected, are you willing to put your future generations' welfare ahead of partisan politics and vote for the Earth? We'll open that up to everybody right now. Jeff?
The NDP is campaigning on a Green New Deal for all Canadians, so that we can make the transition so that no one is left behind. On day one of an NDP government, we're going to cancel the billions of dollars in fossil fuel subsidies and cancel the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, which locks us into fossil fuel subsidies for years to come. We're going to create 300,000 new jobs in the clean energy sector. There's no reason why we haven't taken advantage of the great natural advantages that Canada has. There's no reason why we don't have a sustainable auto sector, why we can't help millions of Canadians to retrofit their homes and buildings by 2030, and expand public transit, as I said in the first question, so that it's accessible, affordable, and carbon-free.
Okay. Colin?
Climate change is the reason of the Green Party exists. we take it most seriously and actually have the most aggressive plan. All other major parties' plan is inadequate to maintain the less than 1.5 degrees required for a habitable planet. Only the Green Party wants to ban fracking, which also ruins water as well as produce natural gas. We want to stop the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion as well as get rid of the pipeline because it's not needed. The Liberals and Conservatives have been very careful not to roll out any changes in the oil sands or oil and gas industry as any part of their platform. The Liberals government even had the gall to say the profits from the Trans Mountain Pipeline would then be invested in green energy products. First of all, there will be no profit. What they're trying to do is trick you into thinking that they are concerned about the environment, so you will vote for them. They are not concerned about the environment. They just want to continue resource extraction and burning of carbon dioxide. The oil and gas industry, in extraction only, is responsible for 200 out of Canada's 700 megatons per year. That's extraction. If you then burn that, it is well over 50% of our carbon emissions. They're trying to convince us that us using plastic straws and plastic bags is the problem and that you driving to the store is the real problem. The federal government, whether it is liberal or conservative, does not want to change their profits. That is what needs to happen. We need to change our federal government. That is why I'm involved. That is the level at which change needs to happen so we do not have a climate catastrophe, so that our children can have a habitable planet. Because we do not inherit the planet from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. Thank you.
Irma DeVries, what does the Christian Heritage Party have?
The Christian Heritage Party recognizes our responsibility to steward and care for the natural environment. We want to protect Canada's air, soil, and water from destructive contamination of man-made chemicals. CO2 is a natural, beneficial gas. It is not a pollutant. CO2 as the cause of climate change is an unproven theory. We oppose all carbon taxes, cap and trade, and carbon credits. Farmers buy CO2 to put into their soil. Farmers buy CO2 to put into their greenhouses. Today, this room is full of CO2 because you've breathed it out. We have to think about the fact that trying to protect us from CO2 is actually a move to try to destroy human life. And I think that's a real problem.
Okay, thank you, Irma. We're going to move on to our next question here about education, and we'll throw this out to the floor. This is from Laura. What are your thoughts on the cost of post-secondary education and the debt young people are incurring? What is your party willing to do to help them to reduce their debt load? Who wants to take a shot at this one?
Well, first of all, the NDP is committed to working towards a system where where post-secondary education is part of our public education system. Back to that meeting that I had at Waterloo, and one of the most striking things I was told was that colleges and universities can no longer call themselves public institutions because more than 50% of their operating budget comes outside of public sources. That's shameful. And what we need to do is, through legislation, because it is shared jurisdiction, make sure that provinces get education transfers, dedicated education transfers, based on the lowering of financial barriers. And one thing that the NDP will do on day one, because we'll make students a priority, is to cancel all interest on the federal portion of student loans. That'll be a huge part of the debt load relieved immediately.
Okay, John Nader, what would the Conservatives do?
Thanks, Eddie. First of all, I think we have to recognize the exceptional educational institutions we have here in Ontario and across Canada. They truly are second to none internationally, and I think internationally they've been recognized as such. One of the things I've always promoted is that when we're looking at funding for post-secondary education for students, we should really focus on merit-based for some of the students. You know, those who work hard, who do well, they should be rewarded for their hard work. We should also be looking at the RESP program. One of the things we proposed is increasing the grant for the contribution from the federal government for Canadians who save for their kids and grandkids' education, and we'll increase that for the for across the board. But we'll also increase it even more for the lowest income Canadians to invest in the RESP.
Okay. But, Perry Mitchell, what would the Liberals be doing in this situation?
Well, they come out with a new policy for this election, and because they realize it's a problem that post-secondary education needs to have funding for our students to go, because we depend on them to provide us with technology and with social services down the road. So they want to say that they increase Canada Students Grant by 40%, giving students up to $1,200 more. They want to give students a 2-year grace period on their student loans, interest-free, and no repayment until they are making $35,000 a year. And they let students pause in their repayment with no interest when they start a family. Repayments won't kick in until the youngest child turns 5.
Okay. Thank you, Perry. Roger?
Well, certainly education is important, and we all know it, and we all want to support it, and the People's Party of Canada puts the people first. And so we totally intend to invest in education, and we're going to come up, we have a plan to come up with some money in order to do that, and one of the first things we're going to look at is ending corporate welfare. Corporate welfare, we lose billions of dollars this year, or every year in this country, because political parties hand their business friends money and give them money, and the money is gone. And so we're going to end all forms of corporate welfare and put that money partially back into education. We're also going to phase out aid to developing countries, except in the event of humanitarian need. And once again, that's going to give us more money to help all of us as Canadians and to put Canadians first. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Colin?
The Green Party supports education more than any other party. We want to, first of all, most students walk out of undergraduate university with a $26,000 debt. We want to forgive the federal portion of that as a grant. Done. Day one. We want to make, well, we're going to eliminate the RESPs, but only because we're making tuition free. Post-secondary education and our children reaching their full potential is what we need. We need people to go to school, become trained, and enter the workforce, because there's going to be more work than ever. The Green Party, as part of their 100% domestic retrofit by 2030, is going to need 4 million workers. So I'm not talking just university. We need engineers to solve a lot of problems. We need plumbers, electricians, welders. We need everybody working, because we need to decrease our carbon footprint to 0 by 2050. Thank you.
Okay. And Irma, we'll let you finish up here.
Not everyone needs to go to university. There's a lot of need in the skills trades. We also have to think about the best use of federal funds would be to give them to the students who can vote with their feet. So the student chooses the university, and therefore the universities would be competing for students, and therefore the price of an education would go down. My question for all these men here at this table is, where are you going to get the money to pay for this contract to send every student to school for as long as they wish? That's unsustainable. We need to pay our national debt first, so that we would have money to give free education to all.
Okay, we've got just a moment left. Colin, you had a follow-up on this.
When I was saying there was free tuition, I noticed a man shaking his hands. So this will cost billions of dollars. The Trans Mountain Pipeline cost $4.6 billion, and the expansion is going to cost $9.3. That's going to cost, that money could be better spent on education, not ruining the planet.
Okay. Anybody else? We're okay for time right now? Okay. The next question we have here is about seniors and pensions. This is from Bruce. This will be open to the floor here. Many of our seniors live in poverty. What are you going to be doing about raising their pensions? Roger?
okay, I'd like to talk not just about seniors, but focus on veterans as well. Past governments have removed monthly payments to the veterans, and we are going to replace those and help those veterans to sustain themselves, because frankly, what's gone on in the past with the same old parties is they've thrown the veterans to the wolves, and it's very disrespectful, considering that those people put those their lives on the line for all of our persons to be safe. And also, we're making some upgrades in the healthcare system. One of the issues with wait times right now is that the federal government currently gives money to the provinces for health, but the provinces don't necessarily deliver that. So we're going to collect the GST at the federal level, and we're going to give the provinces $40 billion each and every year so that they have sustainable funding that they can count on each and every year, instead of waiting to find out what's coming down the pipe next. And this is obviously going to help seniors a lot.
Okay. Perry, we'll throw it at you, talking about seniors, and we're becoming such a graying society. How will the Liberals help out?
Well, this Liberal is very interested in pensions and senior citizens. At 78, I have a reason for it. Well, firstly, when the Liberals came into power, they reversed what the Conservatives did by making retirement age at 67 rather than 65, that you couldn't collect your pension until then. And that was the beginning of the work that the Liberal Party has done to help seniors. For example, single seniors have a real problem, especially if they don't have Canada pension. If they're depending on old age pension and the supplement, if two of them live on that, they can barely get by. But when one dies, the other one is struggling to try and get by with just the old age pension and the supplement. We plan to, after the age of 75, we're going to increase the old age security by 10%. That's an average of $729 for more than 20,000 seniors. And finally, we're going to pay attention to what widows have to deal with in the business of pensions. Because for many, single widows or widowers do not have enough money to live on, and they need to have that money from the government in a form of a pension.
Okay, as we head down the table, John Nader, what would the Conservatives do?
First of all, just to clarify something that Peary said, he talked a little bit about the CPP survivor benefit. We have to clarify that any change to that takes 40 years to fully implement. So no senior living today will be benefiting from those changes. But when I go across this riding, I've knocked on a lot of doors across Perth-Wellington. I think as of this morning, we're up to just under 59,000 doors that we've hit across Perth-Wellington. Multiple times. There's only 44,000 doors in Perth-Wellington, just to clarify that. But the most frequent thing I hear at the doorstep is from seniors. Seniors who are living in their own homes still, and they might be getting by, but just barely.
Okay. We're timed up on that. We'll quickly just go through the rest. Irma, I know you wanted to say something.
The Christian Heritage Party would initiate a PISA, Personal Income Security Account. For every Canadian, when you start work, you would be putting money in and your employer would be putting money in, same as the CPP, except this would be a self-managed fund, not a government-managed fund, and therefore you can use that money when you need it. We also would not allow companies to evade responsibility regarding employee pension plans. When they go bankrupt, the employees need to have first dibs on any money that's available.
Okay. We're running into extra innings, so Jeff will get you quickly here.
We're going to strengthen CPP, make the GIS enrollment retroactive, and strengthen OAS as well. There's no reason why a senior should be in poverty at all, but especially because they didn't fill in the appropriate paperwork. I want to take this time to talk about our universal pharmacare plan. We want to make sure that everyone has adequate prescription coverage, so that no one has to cut their pills in half or decide between their medication and their groceries. And with that, that's going to save a lot of healthcare dollars and make sure that seniors can live and retire in dignity.
Okay. And Colin.
In addition to the NDP, we're also proposing universal pharmacare, which will have benefits in the healthcare area. We at the Green Party don't think that your bureaucratic skill is what should make you have an income as a senior. We think that every person should have a livable income, whether or not they, fill out the right form, they know all the acronyms. We are proposing a guaranteed livable income, which is the amount of money that you will get depending on which region you live in, that will allow you not just to scrape by, but will allow for you to be healthy and robust, and it will save money in, one, the administration of all those other programs that have wonderful acronyms. Two, it will save money in healthcare because people will be in better shape. People will live longer and be healthier. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Colin. With that in mind, too, and we'll throw this open. One lady sent us wrote in. She said, for transparency, I'm a mother of a teen with complex disabilities who for 5 years I was unemployed, didn't qualify for EI as I left my job voluntarily. To manage the complex health and social services systems, I was his case manager, researcher, OT, PT, speech therapist, respite worker, and his mother. This is basically a portrait of caregivers looking at their report. StatsCan said that 8.1 million Canadians have taken on the role of caregiver for family members who are aging, ill, or disabled, and many lose income as they can't work full or part-time. All major parties have released a strategy for senior care, but not all of them specifically include proposals for unpaid caregivers. There's a wide definition pretty much by each party as to who an unpaid caregiver is and how they're going to be compensated. What is your belief? And we'll open this up to the floor here. What is your belief on the role of caregivers, on how they should be compensated? And how would your party represent a bill if elected? Irma.
Our party has, for the last 10 or 15 years, been talking about a family care allowance. We would give any parent that stays home to look after a child, an elderly relative, or a disabled person $1,000 a month to stay home. Now, that's been $1,000 a month for a few years, and I think maybe we need to increase that number. But that money should also be claimed under CPP as earnings so that you do get a CPP later on. My heart goes out to the people who say that they didn't have CPP because they stayed home with their family, and I think that's a travesty. We need to look after people in their elderly years, and what we currently have is not sufficient.
Okay, John Nader, how will the Conservatives handle this?
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. And I think a few points have been made already, and I think that was an excellent question because it really does focus on the role that so many members of families play. And I think more and more we're seeing it's not just caring for seniors, for loved ones as they age, but also for young children as well. There's so many in this generation, they're caring both for their aging parents, but also for the kids as well. Last Friday I was in Alma, and I just happened to knock on a doorstep, and it was a mother who shared her story with me, and it broke my heart. And it was the story of her son had severe challenges, both physical and mental illness. And she talked about how she had to leave him in hospital for 3 months. Not because he had to be in the hospital, because she couldn't care for him at home. She just couldn't do it any longer. And it broke her heart, and it broke my heart at the door as well. And it took 3 months before she was able to get him into a group home, which was in Brampton. She lived in Alma. That was a huge sacrifice that she took for the best interest of her son. And so we need to be focusing on those families who have those situations. So that's an example of a young person, but it goes for both directions, both young people and senior citizens who are being affected by the unpaid caregivers that are truly the heroes of our society, of our healthcare system, and of our development system as well.
Perry Mitchell from the Liberals.
You know, it's a problem that's uniquely individual to everybody that faces it. My first wife was sick for years, and she was in hospital and out of hospital and in hospital and out of hospital. And thank goodness that I worked across the street from the home so that I was always there, close there to assist her if she needed it and when she needed it. But it's a very, very difficult and tricky situation. John, you didn't give an answer as to what you would do. You just said it was a problem, and I agree with you. It's a problem. We have to start working with the province because they provide many of the services like group homes that we need to use. So the reality is it's about getting people working together and dealing with this thing. It's not something you can just write a check, close your eyes, and go to bed. It won't work that way.
Okay. As we head down the table, Roger?
There's a lot of really touching and disturbing stories out there on this subject, and I guess from my perspective, I'm wondering why the same old parties who have been in power since Confederation haven't fixed it. This problem's been around for a long time, and we need to start doing politics differently. We need to start thinking outside of the box, and we need to improve this situation across the board. And I'm telling you, the People's Party of Canada is going to take a real hard, serious look at this, and we are going to put Canadians first.
Okay. Thank you, Colin.
An unpaid caregiver at home would qualify for the guaranteed livable income. At the hospital, I meet a lot of people who, as their parents age and fall into poor health, have to take a lot of time off of work in order to help their parents and attend all sorts of stuff. It is a shame that happens, that these people are pulled out of the workforce and then find themselves destitute with a sick parent. The guaranteed livable income will solve that problem. Healthcare is a provincial, in the provincial jurisdiction. Doug Ford hasn't made it to healthcare yet. Has anyone noticed that? That's not going to happen until after this election is decided. They're still studying everything. They're making their super agency, which means more bureaucracy, not less. We need better care and more frontline workers in healthcare, not more administration.
Jeff?
I got emotional when you posed the question because I'm looking at my two unpaid caregivers that made a lot of sacrifices so that I could be sitting here today. And to answer the question specifically first, the NDP is going to conduct a review of all income security programs through a disability lens, and including making sure that parents with children who have episodic disabilities can claim benefits on EI. Another area that I think needs to be addressed is assisted living. And that means that our affordable housing programs have to include accessible housing to make sure that people of all abilities can live fulfilling lives. And accessible transit goes along with that as well. Although Colin is right when he says healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction, we feel in the NDP that both long-term care and home care should be brought under the Canada Health Act. By doing that, that would mean not only that people get the same quality of service wherever they live and whatever their income, but that personal support and home care workers would be fairly protected and not subject to the vagaries of the private sector.
Okay. Thanks for your answers on that. Appreciate it. One other topic that is extremely contentious these days is the carbon tax. Tell me if your party will continue with the carbon tax and who will pay more into it, consumers or business? How will that help attract business, especially to this area? And how much money will be raised that will be used towards it? Do you feel Canadians are being taxed too much, especially when it comes to things like a carbon tax? We'll open up to the floor here. Colin?
Carbon taxes are an important part of any greenhouse gas emission strategy. But what needs to happen is that the companies need to stop emitting, which means we need to stop this massive expansion in oil and gas industry. The Liberal plan does include a carbon tax, but does not include anything to decrease the oil and gas industry's emissions. The Conservative plan doesn't have, well, it has Harper's targets, which are the same as the Liberals. The Conservative plan suggests that, we let industry regulate itself. We remove the carbon tax, so there's no incentive for you not to, drive your car. But instead, we make these wealthy companies pay a small fine for polluting, which they will do, and we will not decrease emissions. The whole point of the carbon tax is that people think about, maybe I should walk to the store as opposed to drive, so that we decrease our output. Our environmental plans need to change, and the oil and gas industry needs to be reined in if we have a hope of maintaining those targets. Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk to the Conservatives about this. How, John?
So the short answer is yes, we would get rid of the carbon tax. The carbon tax targets families, it targets small business owners, it targets the farm industry. Here locally in Perth-Wellington, most people don't have an option but to drive to work. They don't have an option but to use their tractors to take their crops to the elevator. There's simply not an option there. So we're targeting, under the Liberal plan, the individual. Under our plan, we'll be targeting major emitters. And we're actually going to lower the threshold for what counts. So currently it's 50 kilotons. We're going to lower that to 40 kilotons. So anyone above 40 kilotons is going to fall under our new policy. And to clarify what we're going to be doing is anyone who exceeds the target set, those major emitters, they have to reinvest in green technology to lower their emissions. That's the goal of this. The goal is to lower emissions. And under our plan, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has said that a massive investment and change in technology could see 100 million megaton reduction in CO2. That's the direction we need to be taken, as well as we're playing our role internationally. So yes, we need to play our role here, and we can play our role here, but we also have to playing a role on the world stage. It does no good if China is building 300 new coal-fired power plants if they're not reducing their emissions there. So we need to do our part here, but we also have to do our part internationally as well to reduce global emissions.
Okay.
The Liberals will continue the carbon emissions tax because that's the way to reduce carbon emissions. Work in a Ford F-150 or a Mazda, it's your choice. Don't talk about running around going. If you're going to use a great big truck, if you're using a big truck, you pay the price for it. If you're using a Mazda, you pay the price, which is much lower. Don't use that. It just doesn't work in this society. What the Liberals are trying to do is by paying for it. And the big emitters pay more than the little emitters.
Okay. Irma? And we'll get to John.
Make a difference around the world. We need to help China and India reduce their carbon in order to stop world pollution. Now, I still say that CO2 is not a pollution. It is a beneficial natural gas. We need it for photosynthesis. The more carbon we have in the environment, the more our crops grow, the better we have better crops. We also want to say that the British North America so we would not do anything, we would not impose a carbon tax, and we would rescind any such thing.
Okay. Jeff, we're just on borrowed time right now.
The Liberals' approach to the carbon tax has been to give just polluters, and we would stop that immediately on day one. We have to price carbon. We know we have to price carbon, but it's on day one, we're going to be canceling the fossil fuel subsidies and the Trans Mountain Pipeline. National Climate Bank to make sure that green projects can be funded in a timely and
Roger, we'll close things out with you, and then we're just fighting time right now. Okay, Roger, go ahead.
We're going to abolish the carbon tax, and we're going to finish the Trans Mountain Pipeline. It is an undisputed fact that the world's climate has always changed and will continue to change. Until 12,000 years ago, much of Canada was under ice, and it's thanks to natural climate on the theory that CO2 produced by human activity is causing dangerous global warming today or will in the future. Science anymore. It has been hijacked by proponents of big government who are using crude propaganda techniques to impose their views. School children, getting them to pressure their children or pressure their parents and to demonstrate in the streets. This is what the People's Party of Canada stands for.
Okay. On that note, John, we're going to have to leave it at that for just a second here, okay? We've got 10 minutes before you guys. Okay, we'll let it go at that, John, and then we'll come to you, Colin, one more time. Okay, quickly.
%8 from large emitters. And second point is I'd love to know how many hay bales can be hauled in a Mazda.
Okay.
Okay.
Colin.
Just because China has a huge emissions doesn't mean we shouldn't get our own house in order. Thank you. Authority to tell any country that to reduce their emissions, while our per capita emissions are through the roof thanks to the oil and gas industry.
Support, and we'll throw this open to the floor here. Do you support a national action plan on violence against women? Why or why not? I'll open up to the floor here. Jeff?
Yes. In short, in terms of, I'm glad you this issue. We are committed to implement all the calls to action from women and girls, and we're going to take a proactive approach to making sure that we stop workplace violence and harassment, and fund the great organizations on the ground that are doing the work of education and security and safeguarding against gender-based violence.
Thank you. John, you wanted to follow up on that.
First and foremost, I think we have to recognize that there's a long journey left to go in terms of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada. This is a challenge that is not going to be solved overnight, but it's a part of a process and a part of a journey. And I've spoken on this a couple times in the House of Commons on the importance of working towards reconciliation with Indigenous peoples here in Canada. In terms of the specific question of a national action plan, that was one of the reasons why we originally didn't support the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Inquiry, because we thought that the focus should be on action. After the last election, we changed our policy on that. We decided that we would support the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women's Commission, despite the challenges that we saw with the implementation by the current government in terms of that inquiry. But we need concrete action. We need concrete action to protect women and girls. Primarily women and girls that we see being murdered and missing. And we need real action to provide them with the resources that they need, whether they live on reserve or off reserve across the country, so they are not subjected to violence and to terrible situations. So yes, we would support real action to address the missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Colin, and then we'll come to Irma.
The Green Party does support all the recommendations in the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report. We also support repealing the Indian Act, which is inherently racist. Elizabeth May was the only leader who accepted the invitation to the Assembly of First Nations and was honored to attend. The Green Party has a very full policy on reconciliation. The first and foremost is which is actually ending the boil water advisories. I was reading through the Liberal platform. They say they've ended 90 advisories. They started at 100. There's still 90 to go. They've added back. The billions they could spend on that instead is going to the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Okay, thank you. Irma.
Respect for life is the first thing that we need to have in order to stop violence against women everywhere. We have more women, girls, babies, being aborted because they're female. That's called gendercide. That's violence. We need a national inquiry into Indigenous women and girls and what's happening to them, because it has to go beyond racism. We need to include all aspects of the sexualization of both women and girls, and we need to stop that. And then when it comes to the Indian Act, I agree with Jeff that we need to repeal the Indian Act. Our leader, Rod Taylor, has worked with many Indians in northern BC, and he has a great respect for them and their way of life, and he has a great plan for helping work out with them.
Okay, thanks, Irma. Perry Mitchell.
Well, I am a supporter of implementing all the recommendations from that. And we have, in church congregation that I worked in, we had one Aboriginal family. And she was able to teach me and the congregation more about being an Aboriginal and what it's like, and what it's like to be the butt end of the discrimination that has gone on in this country for nearly 400 years. So it is a problem, and we got the problem right here in the room, where people dislike Aboriginal people because of, and check off one of the boxes, and that's something that we really need to stop doing. We need to start working with, understanding, developing empathy for this founding race in our country. It's really important we start now.
Okay, Roger.
We need to maintain our current spending on this portfolio, in our opinion, of $21 billion a year. But we need to redirect it, and we need to allow the Indigenous people to have more input. One of the problems we've discovered is that bureaucrats in Ottawa are telling them how to develop fresh water sources when it's not working for them. And we can clearly see that it's not working. So, but the Indigenous people have had their solutions that they want to bring, but the people in Ottawa bring them another solution, and then it fails again. So we need to treat this file very carefully, because it's just, we have to deal with it with compassion, and just the same as we deal with women's issues, we need to protect not only Indigenous young women, but every woman in Canada, because we put Canadians first.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Don't be going too far, because that's all the time we have for the questions. And I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but if there's any questions you would like to ask them, please do so. The candidates will be sticking around after we close after 9 o'clock this evening. We do want to give the candidates a time for their closing remarks. You will have 2 minutes for your closing remarks, and we will start with Roger Fuhr.
Thank you. Every election is about what you want as a Canadian. Who you vote for should mostly reflect your values and morals. When people exercise strategic voting practices or default votes, democracy fails, because the government is elected on false premises that do not reflect the will of the people. I am asking you to focus on understanding the platforms that are before you, and actually do politics differently by casting your ballot for the candidate whose party mostly reflects your personal values and morals. Then we will have a government that better reflects Canadian values. But you must perform due diligence to accomplish this. Take the time. Do the work of investigating. Please, future generations are counting on you. It's time to do politics differently. We want to let the people know that they matter by using their vote. Do we want the same old, or are we ready to put Canadians first? Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Terry Mitchell from the Liberals, you have 2 minutes for your closing comments.
Well, I'll tell you, it's been a really steep learning curve in the last few weeks because I didn't think for a moment that I'd be here 6 months ago. And I think that one of the things I'm disappointed in tonight is that we didn't talk very much about global warming. We flirted with it, but we didn't talk about it a lot. And I think one of the problems that we need to pay attention to today and tomorrow and the rest of the time is how to arrest this global warming. I want to leave you tonight with one thought. When the Conservatives were in power, Mr. Harper scared me. I was frightened of what he was doing, and I was frightened of the way he was running the party. I'm frightened today with Doug Ford and what Doug Ford's doing to the province and to the people here. Canceling autism support just out of the blue is terrible. 10,000 teachers without a job. That's not the way we do it. Without discussion, it's just kind of a dictatorship. Please consider carefully. The Liberals are not perfect. God knows that. But it's the best alternative that we have in terms of what we're facing today. We need a majority government, and we need a government that has proven, yes, it's made mistakes, but it's proven that it is up to the challenge of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Perry. From the Conservatives, John Nader, you have 2 minutes.
Wearing white after Labor Day might be a mistake. Interfering in the course of justice, that's simply unacceptable. Now, it was mentioned as well, and just very briefly, it was implied in a previous answer that there were people in this room who might be intolerant of Indigenous peoples. I think St. Mary's and Perth County are wonderful, welcoming communities, and I wouldn't once presume that anyone in this room would hold intolerant thoughts towards Indigenous peoples or any recognizable group. I think we live in a wonderful community here in Perth County, across Perth-Wellington. I think we should respect that. This election is about a choice. It's about a choice of who you want to represent you in Ottawa, who you want to represent your concerns, your local concerns. I've been proud to serve as your member of parliament for the past 4 years. I've been proud to be a part of the community, attending community events and hearing from you and taking your values, your concerns, your issues back to Ottawa and taking them to the Prime Minister and to the government and holding them to account when they failed to best represent you, the people of Perth-Wellington. On October 21st, I asked for your support. I asked for your support to send me back to Ottawa to continue to fight on your behalf, to continue to fight on behalf of our communities and on behalf of the families who live here. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Irma DeVries, you've got 2 minutes.
If you are a Canadian, then you have a Christian heritage. Do no harm to your neighbor and do what you would say you were to do. That's a basic principle for living. The first human right is the right to life. Strong families make a strong nation. Freedom to worship, freedom to contract, freedom to own property. All are God-given rights. All are being eroded. A contract consists of an offer, full disclosure, a meeting of the minds or agreement, and then fulfillment. These men have offered many perks and handouts in return for your vote. Would you contract without knowing the full cost of your indebtedness? My contract offer will cost you less. It exposes the regressive nature of the so-called progressive policies of all these other parties. We want a better future, life, family, freedom. You are buying the contract, either by your vote or by your tacit agreement. On October 21st, vote for CHP, vote for Christian Heritage Party Canada, vote for Irma DeVries. Thank you.
Thanks, Irma. From the NDP, Jeff Crowder, you have 2 minutes.
I've had thousands of conversations with voters all across the riding, and there's no question that people are engaged. But I've heard far too many people say that they just won't vote this time. Trust in our political leaders is low because of broken promises, misleading claims, and an utter lack of solutions for working people. And now that the scale of the climate crisis is known and clear to everyone, people despair that anything can be done. Well, let me remind you what Jack Layton consistently told us. Don't let them tell you it can't be done. A vote for the NDP is a vote for different choices. It's a vote for a Green New Deal for all Canadians that will meet our climate targets. It's a vote for health care from head to toe, pharmacare, and a family doctor when you need one. It's a vote for accessible and affordable transportation for all, and it's a vote for proportional representation so that when you vote, you can vote for what you actually want and not for whom you despise the least. We can make these commitments to you because we choose not to give the breaks to the millionaires and the billionaires. And we're not going to set policy based on the whims of the lobbyists and powerful corporations. Canada needs a government of the left to lead us back from the brink, and that can only be the NDP. There's no question where we stand. We're in it for you.
Thank you, Jeff. And last but not least, from the Green Party, Colin Simons.
Thank you. I just want to remind Irma that there's plenty of Canadians that are not Christian, and we're all equal. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a turning point in our political history and also in the history of our world. We all need to realize that the climate crisis, although still 20 years away, for the worst of it, is still coming. When you go to the ballot box this October 21st, I want to make sure that everyone in this room has had a conversation with someone younger than them. Because their vote, they may not be able to vote. We need to talk to them, and you ask them, if you're unsure about the Green Party or the climate crisis, you ask them what the biggest issue is on their mind and see what they say. Thanksgiving happens the week before, so that it'll be a perfect time for everyone to chat around the dinner table while you're eating turkey about politics and who signs on the line. At the Green Party, as you can tell, we're pretty passionate about the climate crisis, but we also have a full and robust social platform in order to support people to be healthy and to innovate, because we need those kids going to school to help solve this problem. On October 21st, I will hope that you don't vote traditionally, that you think about the current issues and the current candidates and who you think can represent you and future generations the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin. And I don't care who you vote for. I know that I'm preaching to the choir that you'll be out to vote, but can we at least give a round of applause for these individuals? It takes a lot and a lot of commitment to do what they're doing and to come here and face an audience like this. We will do this again next week in Stratford at City Hall. I want to thank our sponsors once again. We couldn't do it without Pharma Company of St. Mary's, Peak Select Realty, of course, everyone for coming. When you're driving home tonight, when you're walking home, when you're passing by the rink here, when you're passing by the hospital, when you're passing by the schools, think, what are these people going to be doing for you? Who will represent you the best? Thank you to the candidates for appearing. The Stratford and District Chamber of Commerce has one more debate. That'll be next Thursday at Stratford City Hall. Thanks to Rogers and St. Mary's Radio for covering tonight's debate. You can also get more information. Please stay behind, speak directly to the candidates since we're wrapping things up. I appreciate everyone's time for being here this evening. You've been a great audience. Thank you so much for being here. We'll hopefully do this again soon. Thank you. Good night.